Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Cornerstone, the show where we take 2 weeks off and then act like nothing happened. I'm your host, Shane Kai, and I am fulfilling my promise from yesterday, where I'm going to be filming a few episodes this week to make up for lost time. I thought about something at work that I could talk about today, and I didn't really plan it out in my head, so I'm kind of excited to just kind of wing it this episode. So, space. What's the deal with it? For the last few years, I have been so enraptured by space and the vast darkness surrounding the planet that we call home. The other planets that are around us, the stars, the natural phenomena that we just can't explain sometimes, and just the mystery of what else is out there beyond what the eye can see. It's just so captivating and interesting. It's even more special to someone like me as a Christian, even though I don't fully understand all of these things that have been placed in the universe. The one thing I do know is that they have indeed been placed. They were created by a maker, by a designer. And sometimes I go down a rabbit hole of just learning different facts about the universe and the planets around us and all kinds of stuff. It's just so interesting and fascinating. I find it very fascinating. And then on top of that, there's a lot of cool history in our nation and the other nations of the world and about their ventures into space and the accomplishments that they have reached. Just sending their first satellite into space, sending an animal into space, sending a man into space, getting pictures of the moon, getting pictures of the other side of the moon, getting a man on the moon. These accomplishments have gone down in history as incredible feats of man and man's ingenuity. And it's just so fascinating reading all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to share a couple things that I've learned in the past few years. So during the time of the space race, the president that was in power was John F. Kennedy. And this was before they had put a man on the moon. The United States was at war with another country, that being Russia. And that's the United States and Russia were the two primary powers that were involved in this space race. And the space race was all about becoming the first country to do all these different things. And a few of the things I already mentioned, like I said, getting a man into space, sending an animal into space, getting pictures of the moon, sending a satellite into space. All of these accomplishments were part of this race to see which country could do it first. Interestingly enough, it was Russia that actually won the majority of these accomplishments. They were the ones who managed to get a man into space first. They were the ones who managed to get photos of the moon first and all these kind of things. I could be wrong about those two things specifically, but what I do know is that Russia was beating America in the majority of these accomplishments. But there was one challenge that still hadn't been accomplished yet, and that was getting a man on the moon. And America believed that even though they were losing the vast majority of these challenges, they believed that getting a man on the moon would set them in first place. They believed that that single challenge was big enough to make them win the race entirely. And we all know the story. America did get there first. Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. But what you might not know is that originally, before they accomplished it, John F. Kennedy had proposed to the public as well as Russia. I'll include the exact quote in the description, but for now I'm just going to paraphrase. He said, "Why should man's first expedition onto the moon be solo and alone? Why should we not have some sort of peace and some sort of why should we treat man's first step on the moon as some kind of battle? This is surely a crazy human achievement. And he said, I propose a joint expedition between America and Russia. I believe that we can work together to achieve this accomplishment side by side.
I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon. Why, therefore, should man's first flight to the moon be a matter of national competition? Why should the United States and the Soviet Union, in preparing for such expeditions, become involved in immense duplications of research, construction, and expenditure?
The person in power at Russia, I don't know what you call it, president, king, I don't know. I guess you'd say president, but just the Russian equivalent of president. At the time, he said no. He declined and said, no, we'll just do it on our own. And like I said, we all know how the story goes. We got there first. We won. Interestingly enough, after that Russian president died, one of his right-hand men came forward and claimed that shortly after JFK had made that proposition, he had actually thought about reconsidering. And he went on to say that he was planning on changing his mind and actually going forward with a joint expedition with America. But the reason why that didn't happen was because shortly after he made that decision in quiet, John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And when a new president came to take his place, that president of Russia didn't trust him as much. And so he never went forward, and they continued to battle in this race. And I just find that very interesting. Imagine a world where Russia and America work together to make it to the moon. Think about our foreign relations, right? Think about our relationship with Russia now. I mean, I don't know for sure. I know that there's probably a lot of things that go into foreign relations, but I truly believe that if they had established that joint connection, our relation with Russia would be way better than what it is now. And it's just such an interesting story, because it's not just like, oh, what could have been. It's not necessarily just a story of what could have been. It's a story of what almost was. It was very close to being this way, but unfortunately JFK died. Well, he was murdered, and it didn't end up happening. And I think about that sometimes. I'm like, wow, that is so interesting. We could live in a world where Russia and America stood side by side and landed on the moon together. But we're not in that timeline, unfortunately. I think this is probably the genocide route. Moving away from our nation's history and going into actual facts about space, one thing that I've thought about a lot is how our rockets get into space, by exiting Earth's atmosphere and getting into just open space. It's said that I think 75, I could be wrong about the exact number, but I think it's roughly 75% of a rocket's fuel is spent just getting out of Earth's atmosphere, because it's that difficult. It is that difficult to work against gravity and to get out of the atmosphere. Once you're actually out of the atmosphere and you don't have gravity pulling against you, it's much easier to move around, and most of your fuel had already been spent. And because fuel is such a massive part of the rocket's weight, it's funny to think that by the time the rocket gets out of the Earth's atmosphere, it has shed off so much of its weight, and that rocket itself is much lighter than when it left. I sometimes think, imagine if gravity on Earth was just a little bit stronger, or maybe the Earth was a little bit bigger, or the atmosphere was a little bit more harsh. There is a very likely possibility that we would never have gone out into space, simply because we wouldn't be able to, because we're fighting this battle against the atmosphere. And if there were just some small tweaks in the way that our planet works and its atmosphere and the gravity, there's a very good chance that we would have never made it this far. But thankfully, we do have a shot. We do have a chance. And even though it takes a lot of fuel to get out of the atmosphere, at least we can. At least we can do it. I could probably talk all day about space facts, about planets and how stars live and then die and then become black holes, and how there are theories of exoplanets and megastructures all around the universe. I could definitely talk all day about this kind of stuff. I won't, because I don't want to take up too much time in this episode. But I just wanted to get you thinking about space, because I wanted to reach this point. I often ask the question, why did God create such a vast universe when we can't even observe most of it? The universe is impossibly vast, and yet the information that we have collected and the things that we can observe are just this tiny little bubble of what God has actually created. And I ask myself, why did God create it? Why did God create all of this stuff? Why did God create all of these natural laws that are in place, and all of these things happening around space that NASA has recorded and observed? Why did God do all of that if we can barely make it to the moon, and if we can barely see past our own universe? Why? It's not really a question you can answer. And realistically, we will never know the answer until we get to heaven. But I have a theory. My theory is that we as humans worry about our lives constantly. Worrying is technically a sin, and it's one of the most common sins in the entire world. We all worry. We all stress about things, because God calls us to not worry. God calls us to put our faith and trust into God, and yet we all worry. It's just kind of a natural thing about us humans, about, the fallen men. See, we worry about our daily lives. We worry about our communities. We worry about our nation and about our world. We worry about everything. Society, the people around us. We worry about literally everything. And I think that when we reach heaven, when we are called up to heaven, and maybe when the tribulation period is over and everything is said and done, I believe that God is going to pull the curtain on the rest of the universe, and he's going to say something along the lines of, look at what I created. And he's going to show us everything. And he's going to show us all of the natural catastrophes that have been going on across the entire cosmos. He's going to show us every little asteroid that destroyed a planet, every single explosion, every single extinction level event. And he's going to say, look at everything that I created, and look at everything that could have happened, but didn't, because I protected Earth. And now look at how much you guys were worrying about your lives. And he's going to say, look at everything I did. Look at everything that I created, and look at how I protected you. And he's going to ask us, why were you worrying? Why were you worrying about your lives when I was doing all of this? And I continued to do more on Earth. It may not have seemed like it because you were in the thick of it, But when you see the vast open picture and you realize, wow, for our entire lives, God has been in control and he's been protecting us. And that's when we're going to realize why he created the universe. That's just my personal theory. So our study time for today is pretty simple. I don't have my Bible with me at the moment, but I encourage everyone who's watching to go back and read the first chapter of Genesis. It's a pretty well-known chapter. Everyone kind of knows the flow of it and how it goes, but I just encourage you to read every detail and really try to imagine God creating the entire universe in those pieces of scripture. And I think when I was younger, I would read that story, the first chapter of Genesis, and it was kind of cool when I was growing up, but it wasn't crazy. But when I got older, I started to pay attention to each individual word and the context and understanding what each word meant. It's an incredible journey. It really is. When you really lay out a timeline of everything that God created in sequential order, it's crazy. It's really crazy. It's beautiful. And man, what I wouldn't do to be able to witness God create something like that again. I hope we have that opportunity. I really do. I hope that we have the opportunity when we reach heaven, we can just say, God, hey God, give us a demonstration, make something so we can watch it. We want to see you make something. I hope that we can do that. And he's going to go, of course, and he'll make a new planet or whatever. And, he won't put anything on it. Maybe he'll just, delete it. Maybe he'll just throw it away after he's finished. But I would love to see how God created. I would love to see the creation of the universe with my own eyes. I would have loved to do that. And I hope that God will show us something like that in heaven. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. I'm not going to have any prayer requests for these episodes because they're much shorter. If you guys have any questions for me, comments, or prayer requests, you can always let me know in the comment section down below. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great week. I'll see you all maybe Friday. And if not, then just the next Monday. And God bless.